Okay, guys. So some key terms in the pawn's endgames. This is probably the most basic pawn endgames that you guys have witnessed. Probably played in one of your games. So who knows how is it called right now? The situation that we have on the board.
Opposition.
Very good, opposition. And so basically, the opposition is when we have one king standing in front of the other king. And right now it's kind of a Zugzwang, if you heard about that. So a Zugzwang is a position where if you make some move, it's actually not such a desirable move for you, right? So guess what? So who knows what's the result? Is it white's going to win this position, or is it going to end up in a draw? Maybe black is going to win. Anybody has any?
Must know whose turn it is.
Ah, very good, very good. It was a catch question. Okay, so right now I think I set it up for white to move. What do you guys think if it's white to move? It is a draw, right? Everybody agrees if it's white to move. What about if it was black to move?
It's a win for white.
It's a win for white. Yeah, and that's correct as well. Okay, so the opposition now. So for example, if it's white to move and white has to move the king, he can move it to e5 or c5. Then the best case scenario is that the black king will have to move in front of the king, right? And then white will try to push the pawn. Black moves the pawn again. So obviously the end goal for white is to promote to a queen, right? So he's going to push the pawn as much as possible. And now comes a key moment for black to draw the position, right? So black's options are between king c6, king c8, king d8, and even king to e8. So only one of those options actually draws the position. So you have 25% chance of guessing here correctly. So anybody knows what's the drawing move? King d8. Yes, very good, excellent. So you guys know your basics. Always move the king behind the pawn, okay? Because I actually usually study it this way that if your opponent pushes the pawn with a check, that's supposed to end up in a draw. So king d8. And now white is in a Zugzwang. He has to move the king to d6. In this case, it's a stalemate. All right. Now, what's the difference within the first position? Now, we have an opposition, but if it's a black to move, black is the one who has to move the king. And black has to move the king either to c7 or e7, right? So you can set it up. So what happens if black just moves the king to e7? How does white win here?
C6.
Exactly, king to c6. Okay, so he's gonna come from the other side. All right. Now, if king e6, then it's an easy win, right? Because I'm just going to promote, check, and king c7. Going to promote to a queen. But the king goes to d8. And now, king d6, very well. King d6. And now black has to move his king to c8. Now here white has two options on how to win. The easiest option is king e7. All right, and then the idea is that white wants to defend with his king all those squares. It's an easy pass for the pawn, right? But there's another option for white, and it's actually to push the pawn on d5. And king to d8. Now again, we have an opposition, right? The two kings are in front of each other. But right now, it is white to move, right? So did white make a mistake Or is it still winning? Still winning, right? Because so the rule says if the king goes to the 6th rank, then it doesn't matter whose move it is, and white is winning. So for example, if it's white to move, well, if it's black to move, then we do the same thing. If it's white to move, then white pushes the pawn without a check. And black is the one who is in Zugzwang. So king c7 and king to e7. Okay, very well, very good, very good. All right, I'm going to discuss something more advanced right now. We are going to move into a queen versus pawn. Okay, so this is one of the theoretical positions, right? White has a king and a queen. For the purposes of our example, the king is always going to be far. Okay, so basically the queen is trying to fight against the king and the pawn. So obviously, if it's black to move, black is going to promote, right, to a queen, and most of the queen's endgames, they end up in a draw, right, because just because there are so many repetitions and checks. So it is white to move here. So think about this position. Do you guys think that white is going to win or black is going to draw this position? Okay, he can pin the pawn, that's correct, but then the king moves.
Yeah.
Queen f3. Okay, that can be okay. So what do you think is that white wins?
At that point,
Then
and you just walk the king down?
okay, so let's see. So we had a nice first move, queen to f3, to pin. A good idea to pin the pawn. So probably I would have to move my king to d2. Right? Queen to d5. You guys agree with that? Okay, so let's try to check the king. And I can just move it maybe to c2. Queen c4. Okay. King d2. Queen d4. All right. What has changed? So queen to e3. Attacking my pawn and not doing any checks. So now it forces my king to go to d1. Right? So this is one of the key positions to remember in an endgame of queen versus one pawn. Okay, so principle number one, you would like to get your queen as close as possible to the king and the pawn. Okay, so zigzagging sometimes, but this is our key position. And now the queen is going to d3. Check. So now what happens is that black is in a Zugzwang because if he moves to c1, he loses this pawn on e2. Okay. And if the king moves to e1, great. Yeah, that gives us time for the king to come over. Now it's going to take a while because the king moves again to f2. And then we have to do it all over again. Check, and then come from the other side. Basically, we have to do it all over again, and then the king comes to d3. And with the help of the king, we're going to capture this pawn. Okay, very good, very good. What about if I just move the pawn one square to the right? Looks totally the same, but it's hard to calculate till the end. But just a hunch. What's the result? Anybody knows? Draw. Okay. Anybody for a win? Anybody thinks that white's gonna win?
I think white.
Okay, white will win. All right, we have a fight. All right, sounds good. So first move. If white is gonna win, you wanted to check on e4, right? All right, excellent. Good. So you listened to my previous position, saying that the queen has to come as close as possible to the king. All right, king to d2, let's say. And then queen f3, right? king e1. And we got to the same key position as we saw before. And now queen e3. Right, check. So if the king moves to d1, then we take the pawn. So the king, we force the king to go to f1. All right, so looks like it's all the same, right? So now the king moves to g7, right? We bring the king. And now king to g2. So what is the difference? All right, white to move. Any suggestions for white? Okay, queen e4 check. King g1. All right, king g4, so check. Then we got to the key position, right? Queen to f3. King to g1. Now queen to g3, right? So this is what we were aiming for, right? So this is our key position. All right, so if the king goes to f1, then we can continue bringing our king. But there is one but here, yeah? The king can go to h1.
Yeah, I can't take it.
Exactly. Okay? So if the queen takes on f2, it's a stalemate. All right? So the queen has to keep checking him, and it's a draw. Now, again, obviously it is depending what the white king is. If the white king would be very, very close in the beginning, white would be able to win probably. Okay? But in this case, the king is very far. So the f2 pawn is a draw. All right? I guess we have two more. Okay, so king on f1. Alrighty, so here we have the pawn on g2. Alright, so what do you think about this position? So we move the pawn. Good process of thinking. I like that. Stalemate. Okay, so no stalemate here. So you're saying black has no chance. Okay, anybody wants? Anybody thinks it's a draw? No, win. Okay, and you guys are correct. So actually, immediately here, white can play queen to f3. And here's our key position. So king to e1 loses the pawn. King to g1, we bring the king. And here, if I'm not mistaken, the best move would actually be queen to f2 to pin the pawn. So if the king goes to h3, by the way, that's a very, very easy win, right? Once we bring the queen behind the pawn. Okay, and if the king goes to h1, the queen to h4, then we bring the king in. Okay, all right, very good. And last but not least, so this is a win for white. What about this one? We have a pawn on the edge of the board. On h2, it's white to move. Let's try to find the stalemate over here. Draw, win, draw, win. Draw. We have one draw.
I don't understand what to draw yet.
We can give you some more time.
Because I've studied this.
Yeah, so that's pretty much correct. So let's see. So check. Let's start with some checks. What's the best one? Okay, I'm just gonna zigzag. Hopefully nobody is keeping notations. Okay, so okay, we just got to our key position, right? Queen to g3 check. That's what we need to remember. And again, if the king goes to f1, black is just losing the pawn. So the king has to go to h1. Now, so this is a weird situation because now white wants to win the king, but he can't, right? So because that is going to result in a stalemate, right? So therefore, white actually has to move the queen somewhere, and the king goes to g2. Okay. Now, so there was a good question: where should our king be in order to win? So let's see. How do I set this up? Okay. So what is the idea? Why is the king so close is winning? So yeah. So let him think. So yes, this one. Correct. Yeah. So this one is winning for white. So the idea is to bring the king in front of the king to make an opposition, right? But not right now, because, for example, if we just bring the king in and we bring the king, now we allow the queen to check the white king, right? So this is going to end up in a draw. So first of all, we have to bring the queen inside. So check, check. And now, when the queen is on the second rank, now we bring the king. So the key square is g3. Queen and king to g3. It doesn't really matter where the queen is as long as it's on the second rank. Okay, it can be in a2, b2, d2. So now black has to move his queen somewhere. And then it's going to be mate, check, and mate. Okay, so so it's a good question. Where should the king go? So the key square is g3 in this position, and so the king has to be 2 squares away from that square. So I assume it's going to be all of that.
Well, no,
You can be on d4.
The king on the h file, and then your queen on the g file, and bring your king away.
From this side?
I think so.
All right, let's check.
I think you can push it.
Okay. Would you bet your life on it? Good choice. Okay, so king to d4. So okay, so white to move. You're saying king to e3?
No.
Well, actually, king e3 will win.
Oh, wait, yeah.
King e3 will win. Well, yeah, but we are too close. So I guess the question would be, what king? The king on e4.
No, that's not.
That's not winning. So here. Okay, so what do we have? We had
It's the box.
this, and this.
Yeah, it's the box with that.
The box without the square. Octagon. And if it's on d1,
Then I play king e1.
king e1. Okay. Yeah, that looks correct. Any questions about this endgame?
That's mean.
Well, this endgame is actually useful to know if you're on both sides, right? If you're the queen side or the pawn side, it's pretty useful to know.
Still finish that off first. Okay. The king moves. It's what, black move, right?
Yeah, if you queen,
Then you mate.
then you made an f2.
Right. But if the king just moves, then
Good question. If the king moves,
You mate on
King e2. Yeah, king e2.
king to e2. Yeah, I think that there are lots of options. I would put him in a zugzwang. So I want to get this position, but it's black to move. How do we do that? You can try triangulation, yeah.
I think e2 is the only move I see. For
King to e2?
You said there's lots of moves options.
You just move your queen somewhere.
Well, the queen can move anywhere.
Yeah, that's correct. So I was just thinking just to move the queen to b2 or something, and then forces black to move the king.
There you go. Okay.
All right, good job, guys. Good job. Okay, next one we're gonna have a puzzle on some principle. Let's see who can solve that one. I'm gonna add some more pawns. We had only one pawn this time. Okay, so white to move. The white king to cut off the black king. Well, you just saying maybe to put the king somewhere here.
I mean, just right now, just
So how do we solve those puzzles?
Well, yeah, so the white king has to try and get the back pawn, like you said, but I don't see it. You have to show me ahead what time for me to
1, 2,
sure that it's
3,
good.
4, 5.
I'm just thinking of the Kasparov masterclass video thing where he's just saying all the things and he just moves the kings at the end.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
That's easy when he shows it to you.
I know, exactly.
Okay, so tip number one is what I usually tell my students is to come up with a candidate moves. Okay, it's just like in chess, we cannot analyze all the moves, right? So what kind of candidate moves do we have here? So the first one, and everybody saw that, is going to be a4, right? Any other candidate moves?
There's only 6 moves.
a3, yeah, but probably not. We're not probably not going to analyze a3, but you actually said king to e1, right?
Right.
Okay, so king e1 makes some sense, right? To try and to cut the black's king. Okay, and any other moves? d5. You're gonna give you up this pawn?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think it-
Okay, so we have 3 moves. Okay, so how do we decide? Now, there's another tip I like to say is we can use the power of elimination. So we eliminate those choices. Okay, and it works very well in endgames, but it also works very well in the middle games. Okay, if this one is bad, if this one is bad, then we are left with the one choice. Okay, so the first thing that we like to do is to promote to a queen, right? We have this pass pawn on a4, so obviously we would calculate a4 first. Now, why doesn't this move work?
Black gets there just in time.
Right, so how do we know that?
Counting.
Counting, okay. Yeah. So, okay, great. So, I mean, here we have another great tip for the endgames, which we call the rule of the square. Okay, so how do we know if the king is if the black king is in time to catch the white pawn? And here it is. So we have to go diagonally all the way till the end. We're going to create this square. So basically, if the black king can get anywhere inside this square, it's on time to capture the pawn. And right now he can. So king to e4. Now after he captures the pawn, black is going to end up with 2 pawns. He's going to win the game. Okay.
Not what white wanted.
Sorry?
Not what white wanted, but you must be right. Then king moves to
Yeah.
e1.
So a4 is wrong, right? So let's try king to e1. All right. Well, in this case, I assume that black will play the same thing, right? So king to e4.
Yeah, because if he plays E3, he doesn't get there on time.
Yeah. Let's say king to d2. Now,
Right.
yeah, after he takes this pawn on d4, the game is pretty much over because these 2 pawns, the past protected pawns. And white will, yeah, they are untouchable, exactly. There's a shield. So black's idea, black's plan is very simple. To come in here, stop this pawn, take this pawn while those pawns are defended. Okay,
If you
so
take the backward pawn, the other one just runs away.
exactly.
So frustrating.
So we know it's not king to e1, right? So d5, excellent, excellent move. So what is the idea behind d5? So obviously d5, exactly, very good. So d5, the pawn has to take the pawn, otherwise I'm going to promote. And the idea is correct. So now It seems that the king is in the square. He can get into the square, but then he gets blocked by his own piece. Okay, now it's not over yet. So black can try to win. D4, A5. It looks like black is the one who is going to promote first and checkmate us with a rook. So it's black to move, and black coming to D3. So we see that we are going to be checkmated. And again, we use the power of elimination, right? We have A6 as a candidate move. But there's another move we can play.
E1.
Yes, and now king E1. And now the king stops this pawn, because if king to E3, then king to D1. And that's it. Our pawn is too far away, so the black king cannot capture it. If he plays D2, then we just promote the pawn, and so on. F5 is too slow. And we can just probably go to F8 just to stop him. Okay, so this is a nice trick. This is another thing I wanted to show you guys. The rule of the square. Okay, so remember now the rule of the square is a mirror. By the way, I forgot to mention that in that endgame of the queen and the pawn, it's a mirror, right? So if it was winning, drawing, it's also on the other side is the same thing, right? So if you guys remember, the E2 pawn was win, so the D2 pawn is going to be a win. So the C and the F2 will draw, the G and the B pawns were winning, and H and A are draws.
So what are we saying? That if what's on the square is a pawn is, or?
Yeah, so the other endgame that we should look at, the queen versus the pawn, and the king was far, so it's a mirror, right? So we looked only on the right side, but on the left side is the same thing.
Yeah, if you went from the edge.
Yeah, I usually remember that on the edges it's a draw, and then the knight move, I remember that it's a draw.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in the, for example, in our case, when we have the rule of the square, it's the same thing. So there's a mirror. Let me show it real quick. Okay, so let's say it's black to move, and he can catch the pawn because that's his square, right? So we go diagonally first. And so black is in time to catch the pawn, but also it works on the other side. So obviously if black would be anywhere on this side, on the right side as well. Okay, it's just I cannot do the square as much. No space for the square, on the square. Okay, so we learned some of the basic principles in the pawn's endgame. I wanted to add some extra pieces to our endgame. And now to cover not such a popular topic, but this one is going to be for underpromotion. So usually when we promote a pawn, we promote it to a queen. Yeah. So in this case, this is a puzzle. Looks like white is losing because it's a piece down for 2 pawns. But actually white has a nice combination of how to get a winning position. It's not a mate, but he gets a winning position. Okay, so we can, okay, let's look at this variation. Queen takes, rook. Okay, check. Okay, nice fork. Promote the rook. Kind of. Mini under promotion. Okay, so and now it's white to move, but it looks like the pawn is successfully going to stop the pawns, and more importantly, the pawn is on the right color of the bishop. So if we have dark square, we have this dark square bishop, then he's able to win. If it would be on white squares, for example here, and probably if it was white to move, then he would be able to get into the square. Yeah, so unfortunately this does not work. But good try, good try.
A1,
Oh, I like that idea. Rook A1 threatens mate, so probably black can defend somehow. Maybe take on B7 or
That rook leaves the back rank for white, it's over.
yeah, that's true.
I mean, if he takes on B7 with what piece?
Probably do the queen.
Then is the rook hanging there?
Oh yeah,
D8.
very good. So I can take. Very good. Yeah. So if the queen takes, I'm losing this rook
That's how you took with the king, then you could check and the
on
queen-
A7, and you take the queen. Okay, you got me. I guess I have to play bishop F2. Yeah. Defense.
You can say check with your queen and take the bishop. Check. No, I'm wrong. Okay, I didn't see it right.
Yeah. So here probably he can defend. Right. All right. So what are we looking at for when we look at puzzles? Anybody knows? So
I want to get, if I'm going to underpromote, I've got to get where the king and the queen are in a forkable position.
mm-hmm.
I've
Yes.
got to figure out how to get there.
Mm-hmm. So let's think about our candidate moves. We said queen d8. We said rook a1. Now, usually when you get a puzzle like this with a lot of action, you want to look for action moves, right? And action moves are what?
Checks and captures.
And threats. Very good. And you have to look for those in that order. Okay. So we went to check. So we looked at the one capture and check, which was great. Did not work. We looked at rook a1, which was a threat. It was number 3. But then maybe we skipped some of the checks, of the other checks or captures. Okay. Yes.
C8 check.
All right. So let's look at this move. Rook to c8 check.
I didn't hear you.
Okay. So probably the rook is going to take.
Take C8. Queen take A7.
Very good. And now the key move. Queen takes a7.
Your idea.
Yeah, teamwork.
Sure, Ken.
King takes on a7. And
C8.
knight.
There it is. Okay, I couldn't figure out how to get white.
There you go.
You know, I always play on chess.com and I play some blitz games, some bullet games. And I always pre-move and I also promote to a queen. They have an option to promote automatically to a queen. And so when I get to those positions, I never know how do I promote to a knight or something else. Yeah, I still have no idea.
Yeah, don't do it like Nakamura did a few weeks ago.
Okay, so white to move. Our last puzzle for that subject, for the subject of under promotion. As you can see, white is rook down, but he has 2 pawns, a very strong pawn on e6. So this is white to move.
Well, to promote the pawn, we have to get the king to move. So
Uh-huh.
I assume we check him perhaps on F5 with the knight, but maybe there's another way.
Very good. So the only move, right? We have candidate moves. The only check move. Otherwise, he's probably going to either take the pawn somehow or keep checking us. So knight f5 was played in the game, and black played king to f6.
Still enough.
Unless you want to just back
Okay, so we're trying to promote, so we push the pawn.
All right. So if you push the pawn, I can just take, and if you queen, then I have a checkmate.
It doesn't give us the under promotion trick. Okay.
up. Just loses
Lower,
the game.
lower piece.
No, but if you promote to the knight,
That-
What? I'm confused. Okay, you're right. Yeah.
Well, again, if
You're right. I see it now.
you're confusing yourself. Yes, but We don't have any other checks, right? And I don't see any other threats that we can make other than e7. So obviously e7, your instinct did not let you down. So e7 is the correct move, right? And so now if the king takes on f5, we can just promote to a queen or take the knight. So the question is, what happens if the bishop takes the knight on f5?
And so all the king's roots are cut off because the white king is guarding g5 and g6.
Yeah.
The bishop's guarding, the knight's guarding the two black.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so if I promote to a queen, then black can checkmate me on h2.
What I meant when if black instead of taking the bishop into a king,
Here.
Oh, if that, then he said he would check with.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's correct. So I cannot promote, right, because of the check, checkmate.
No, then rook f1.
Then yes, we have to get the king.
Check. And get the king away.
Out of the opposition. And so now he has to move. I guess, yeah, check. We have to check actually, because this doesn't work. Bishop g4.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good for black. I mean for white.
Always look for those action moves. Okay, so yeah, that's correct. So e7, bishop takes f5, and now e8, checkmate. You don't see those a lot. Oops. So you're taking away from him all of the squares.
We should have like black e1.
Okay, this is not such an easy position. As you can see, you're going to play white again. White has a bishop for 2 pawns, but it looks like he's going to lose the bishop. So think about this position. It is white to move.
What should he for, right? Is it draw?
A draw,
No.
maybe.
Not going for a win.
No, I found it.
All right, let them try it as well. Okay, let's eliminate some moves, right? So what kind of candidate moves do we have?
Bishop to g3.
Bishop g3, yes. Okay, anything else? King e3 and g6. Okay, so we have those 3 moves. Now g6, we already discussed before. Then he probably can take and
Save your bishop.
yeah, you can save your bishop, but I'm really scared of those pawns. So the idea for black, even if I don't win with black, the idea is just to exchange this pawn on h2. So I'm going to bring one of the pawns to f4, take the king back, and then push this pawn all the way down.
My guess is black can win.
And he might even win, yeah, because we have another pawn on h4. So g6 it's not. Bishop to g3 is not working because of f4. That's correct.
Okay, you let the king take the bishop and then king to f3.
Okay, so last option that we got left is king to e3. A bit of a weird move. Okay, so probably the king will take the bishop.
Yeah.
Okay. So what now?
Not f4. You want to go g6? Yeah, g6.
Now you already have a draw, right? So if you play king to f4, that's probably going to be ended in a draw because of f6.
That's not a draw.
Oh, yeah, that's stalemate.
So that's good. Yeah, you can already make a draw.
So g3?
But you want to win.
No.
Okay, so
So f3.
g6. I mean, that's the only other move, isn't it?
g6, okay, yeah.
I see it as a win for white.
But check. So what's the idea of this check? If the king takes the pawn, I take the pawn,
And you lose.
and now he's in a Zugzwang, right?
Yeah.
Because we have the opposition. Once the king moves somewhere, the king escapes. The king can go to g5.
That's what black wants.
So he doesn't take the pawn to keep it in the king in the net.
Exactly. f4. But where should the king go?
G3.
F3.
f3?
F3, yeah.
That's correct. Very good. f3. Not to allow black any counter chances.
Okay. So black.
He has to take that pawn now.
Right? So he has to take the pawn. Now again, we have only one move, because if we do any other move besides taking the pawn, the king is going to go out to g5. So king takes an f4.
Now what?
And now the only move.
Yeah.
Lose it, check.
G5.
g5 check.
And now we already had one draw. We're gonna find another draw somehow.
King F5.
I don't see a win.
So king f5 or king f3?
Don't tell them this is cool.
What's the best
Then
move
Simon
here?
sees it, you have to see
Man,
it.
if then Simon sees it. Shoot. That's getting edited out.
It's a idea and studies.
Is this?
Study people.
How would you describe this type of genre of study?
Self-meaning.
Self. Sounds hard.
Okay, so we have only two options, right? So we can't go to anything on the e file because we let the king out, right? So choices would be between f3 and f5. So let's just try one of them. So king f5. Black has to play again g4. Looks like black is winning because almost he's gonna play g3 and then exchange and get the h pawn for free. But
King
white has only one chance to stop this pawn, and this is by playing king to f4.
You push the pawn takes pawn mate.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
and he's in a Zugzwang.
Oh, it is.
He has to move. Oh, I'd be so bad.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be mad. I'd be like,
Maybe the
cool.
yeah.
and he has to push g3. It's a mate. From the other side, the king can also go to f3, so there is no difference. King to f3. You keep the king from coming out from g4,
He has to push the pawn.
and king to f4.
He has to move the pawn.
That's a checkmate.
Oh, how bad.
That's very difficult to see actually from this for the first position. But again, the way to solve it, especially when you are down on time, is the process of elimination. Come up with those candidate moves that you need to pick from, and then start to eliminate those. Okay, guys. Any questions about pawn endgames or anything we discussed today? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. And I always say that the most of the work, if you want to improve in chess, is done at home. And I know that you guys playing online, you're practicing a lot, so that's why I don't want you to be bored. So I have a few puzzle pages for you. So